This is Support is Sexy, episode 137, with April Dinwoodie, Chief Executive of the Donaldson Adoption Institute. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I interview inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and their lessons to help you take your business and your life to the next level and create something sexy. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm thrilled to have you here. As you know, it just would not be the same without you. And today I am so excited to have our guest, my friend, April Dinwoodie. And April is the Chief Executive of the Donaldson Adoption Institute. And I have known April, I guess it's been, at least 10 years now. Time goes so fast. But during all this time that I've known her, even when she worked in corporate America, which she talks about, she has always been an advocate for adoptive families, children in foster care, adopted children, and it's because it is so deeply personal to her because she, as a woman of color, was adopted by a white family and talks about transracial adoptions, her experience there, her journey of self-discovery through all of that. She has always talked about that personally and created organizations and things that really served a need that she needed when she was younger and even as an adult. But what I love about April's story, that's a little bit of her background, but what I really love about her story and what she's doing now is that she has found a way to align her passion for these things that were very important to her with her purpose in the kind of work that she's doing today. Of course, being the chief executive of the Donaldson Institute, but also these programs that she's created, this wonderful podcast that she started called Born in June, Raised in April, that you must take a listen to. You know, I love storytelling. That's what this podcast is all about. I always say it's strategy wrapped in storytelling from the women that we hear from. But April really tells wonderful stories and really takes you there on her journey with her as you listen to her podcast. So I know you're going to love all of the information that April shares in here, but really it's about the story and hearing one woman's journey of self-discovery and from a professional side, things that she's created to align with herself as she is evolving. So within this episode from April, you will learn how growing up adopted pushed her to learn some coping mechanisms that she still uses today. Also, April's advice for when to tell your child they are adopted, how she had to overcome the fear of quote unquote leaving home, how to create programs and opportunities that align with your personal experience, passion, and purpose, the moment she began to shift from individual work to focusing on impact, also the ways race, class, and culture play into adoption, foster care, and women's reproductive health, how secrecy and shame play into the adoption process. This was something that I hadn't considered until hearing April talk about it. So very educational for me as well. What work she's doing today to preserve families and affect policy. What April wants people to know about transracial adoptions. Also how her podcast, as I mentioned, Born in June, Raised in April, has really been cathartic for her and how she plans to grow and moving it forward. Also how self-care is crucial. You know, we love that. Got to take care of yourself. Support is sexiest when it's for yourself, really. And lastly, resources for adoptions, including even movies and TV shows that she recommends related to adoption, which is interesting to hear. One of the shows I absolutely love. So listen out for that within this episode. And as I said, April mentions other great resources. So I know you're going to love this. Enjoy the story. Get into it. Let me know what you think. You know, you can always find me on social media at Elayne Fluker. And to see how to get in touch with April, learn more about her, hear her podcast, go to supportissexypodcast.com so you can be sure to see all of the resources and links there, how to get in touch with April and all that great stuff. Supportissexypodcast.com. All right, so now, without further ado, April Dinwoodie. So April, I'm so happy to have you here for an episode of Support is Sexy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Elayne. It's an honor.
Absolutely. Truly. So first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
So it was, I guess right around 2000, I want to say, and it was really in response to a self-serving need, quite frankly. I was solving a problem for myself in my adoption journey in search for my biological family by creating a unique program, ultimately to help others who were experiencing adoption and foster care. So I fell in love with it because it was, quite frankly, selfish and creating something in response to a need I had.
Mm-hmm. Now, you grew up in Rhode Island, right?
Yes.
What was April like as a little girl?
Gosh, the little April, I always say that the little April gets healed every time I engage in a conversation or action with family of adoption and community as an adult. And so I think about little April in the classroom, right? In the places where I had to it was clear that I wasn't biologically connected to my family. So I think about the times that are most poignant are the ones where I was having to explain my family, having to explain why my brother or sister didn't look like me or why my parents didn't look like me. And that, is indelible, right? I also think of it in terms of that center of gravity that my family created for me, which is this safe, amazing, unique place in Rhode Island that was almost our own corner of the world that in a lot of ways felt like it was created just for us. So there's like this dichotomy of little April, which is one that was out in the world and that was in a way exposed and had to be a little bit, kind of defensive and kind of always have my radar up. And then the one that was like in this safe, special, warm, unique, fiercely dedicated family that was mine. So there's like a very much a divided space, right, in that.
How old were you when you were adopted? Was it from a baby or?
So I was placed in foster care immediately after leaving the hospital for what was called temporary foster care at the time. From there, I was in foster care several months. I was just reflecting recently that my first Christmas was with my foster family and not with my family that I remained with and ultimately was adopted by. So I was several months old, just shy of like 8 months when I went into a foster to adopt placement, which was my family. And the way adoption works, at least it's still in part today, but also very much so then, there was a kind of a long time in that, my birth mom, what we can assume, was trying to figure out whether or not she would parent me and trying to figure out what was going to happen, which, puts everybody on, it's a tough place to be in. But I wasn't really legally adopted until at least 2 years after that I was placed with my family.
Now, during that time, you're very young, obviously, at that time. Did you have a sense, or what was the feeling that you can remember having because being a biracial woman and then being adopted by a white family? Could you feel a difference? I know they were very loving and, as you said, really grounded you and brought you in and accepted you, but was there this feeling of something's different?
Sure. I mean, so one of the interesting things is a lot of people ask me in the work that I do today, like, when's the right time to tell your child that they're adopted? And I often say, well, if you haven't told them yet, it's too late, right? Like you got to do it tomorrow, right? Because this other thing is that it's always very telling to me when someone remembers the day they were told they were adopted. I don't remember that day, and a lot of people will tell you, some professionals will say, that's a very good thing, that it was really organic. What I was explaining just a bit ago about like having the center of gravity that was my family, that was unique and somewhat not secluded and isolated, but we really created our own space where I felt extremely safe. But I also knew that I realized once, getting embedded into school, I thought there was a brown kid in every family because I existed. My family was white. I wasn't. I just thought that every family was designed that way until I realized it wasn't. And that was when there weren't as many brown kids at school, when there weren't adopted kids at school. So the awakening to my identity and how I fit into my family happened over time. But there wasn't a moment I remember my parents saying, April, you're adopted. They really did organically explain it in ways that fell upon me as a child, that I could understand.
And I know that in looking at some research, I noticed that you said that when you were younger and some people used to inappropriately sort of question you of where you come from or why you look different than your family, and you would say you were the result of, was it a relationship between Harry Belafonte and what's her name from I Dream of Jeannie?
Bewitched. Elizabeth Montgomery
yes,
from
Bewitched.
This is when you don't have a narrative and a story of your existence and your birth,
especially
right?
As a child, I would think.
Right, exactly, and then you see images of people that. Very few images of people, quite frankly, that could look like you in sort of the spaces that I was looking at and the visuals that were created in media at that point. There were a handful of people that I could relate to, and in a way, it was very pragmatic. They could create me like that. The two of them and their colors, right. Could have created my brown skin in my mind. And then at the same time, it was also, it unknowingly at the time really was a way that I help parents understand today of deflecting, right? In a way, I was basically saying to people, without saying, it's not your business, but here's what I'm willing to tell you. Even if it was a tale, even if it was fictitious, it was my way of kind of putting people, and usually people would laugh or look at me strange, but then I didn't have to explain anything else to people. So in a way, I learned some coping mechanisms through fantasy and kind of giving people, what I would call the Heisman, putting my arm up and saying, no,
right.
You're not, this isn't for you. So I made up stories. And I think a lot of kids do that in general, but certainly young people who are adopted and don't have the narrative around, where they came from, as artful as my parents were about explaining adoption to me. What they didn't have access to was really the story, right? The backstory.
Right. Now, who were some of your greatest influences growing up?
Well, first and foremost, my mom. It's not uncommon to hear, I think, a woman say that or a child say that about their greatest influence. But my mother was just such a huge influence on me in terms of her ability to be a mom, to be just a wife, a friend. So the greatest influence, I think, of all is her on me. But then because of that strength in terms of, female strength, I think I found other strong female influences that felt familiar to me, and whether they were a character, whether they were another woman in my life, but I gravitated towards that strong female influence. Unfortunately, I didn't have that many people at the time, and especially in early years, I didn't have that many women of color to lean on, but over time I found them in my, as I grew up and grew into my racial identity. I think I found some of those, which has been very much an explicit effort to be made on my own behalf.
Right. Now, at what point did you leave Rhode Island and move to New York? Or leave Rhode Island, period?
So the first, sure, was college. And it was kind of this interesting thing that, of course, I was going to college. I was the youngest of four. My parents had three children born to them, biologically connected to them. And then I was the youngest. So it really, my coming into the family made two boys and two girls, which was, something that felt right for my parents. And adoption was something that they were really wanting to do. But of my siblings, I'm the only one that went to like a 4-year college and went away to school for lots of different reasons. My brothers went into the military. My sister got married and became a mom, one of the best moms I know on the planet. So I always thought and just was on this path of going to college, but I thought it was incredibly strange to actually leave your family. There was this kind of like steady drumbeat of like, who leaves their family on purpose? So there's a very interesting kind of, I think, unique to adoption in a way, like once you have a family, why would you ever leave it for any reason?
Right.
And that was, in 89, I went to college and I went in New Rochelle to College of New Rochelle, which was like a next step to get me to New York, really, because from there I went to Stanford for a little while after college, but then I came to New York after that.
What was your experience like in college and once you were away from your family? As you mentioned, something that didn't necessarily feel, not that it didn't feel right, but it didn't feel, what is the word I'm looking for?
It didn't feel natural, quite frankly. And,
thank you.
And while my family never did anything to inspire this in me, I actually, if I'm honest, I still feel this a little bit today when I leave home. I feel like the ground is going to swallow up my house and it's not going to be there when I get back. Right? There's just something that, when you have this sort of, other dimension of your existence that hasn't really been fully put together, and you arrive in a family and you don't have a backstory and everything's good. So there's, leaving anytime leaving home is tough, but for college it was incredibly hard. But he'd built up this this exterior that also was about sort of being okay. I got this, strength, power, like I'm good. That happens, I think, in a lot of ways in our human existence. But certainly for me, I don't think anybody had a clue as to how difficult it was for me to leave home. I didn't even know until I could tap into it later on. And that meant that, I was definitely plugged in and present and a decent student. But, and there wasn't a ton of behavior that was concerning, but I definitely feel like it was an opportunity for growth for me, and whether I realized it or not, I was definitely testing boundaries, and as one would do in college. But for me, it was about really having this sense of being happy to be in college and away, but so terrified that, home wouldn't be there when I got back.
Right. Now, while you were in school and then in grad school, did you have a sense of what kind of career you wanted to pursue after graduating?
I did. I mean, and it was kind of just, I feel like it was innate to who as I reflect back now, it was very clear that my ability to communicate, my ability to move very fluidly in spaces, and it wasn't even just something nice to have as part of who I was. It was imperative and necessary for my survival to be able to move into various spaces seamlessly and not skip a beat. And I think that ability to plug in and communicate was the foundation for my choice in major, which was communication arts, but then just has fueled my work in communications, branding, marketing. It was part of who I was even before I went to school. And so that was just, it was almost easy to just decide, and it was even easier to do the work in a way. I felt like this was just what I was designed to do, was to be, be a communicator.
Now, you've had a career where you've had senior level executive positions in marketing and communications, as you mentioned, at companies like JetBlue and many others. But at what point did it become clear to you that you wanted to do work that aligned with your personal experience as an adopted person?
So I had started a search for my biological mother that has gone on and had been going on for just a bit of time when I found her. It's easy actually to find her, all things being as they were. I once I had a little bit of information, it was very easy to track her down. What wasn't easy was creating a relationship with her. She was not interested in being in touch, or really, she wasn't interested in meeting me, and she certainly wasn't interested in a kind of a long-term being in touch kind of thing. So that was transformational for me, and extremely painful. Mm-hmm. And I was doing all of this work, right, this personal work, while I was doing my regular day job, which is what we all sort of have to do in life. But it occurred to me that I had all of this energy, this emotional energy around this experience that I had no outlet for. And I certainly could have put that and wanted to. The idea was to put all that energy and emotion into creating a relationship with my birth mother, and hopefully finding other birth family and my biological father and all those things. When that didn't happen, I just, given my upbringing, and it was kind of one of those like strong New England kind of mottos and mantras, was like, when something's going wrong for you, you don't sit and cry about it. Or you can for a little while, but you just better get up and go do something about it. And the better thing you can do is actually go do something that helps other people. Like, right. then you're onto something. So that was just that was what I did, and I just very naively thought, well, I was at Kenneth Cole at the time. We were doing a lot of work with mentoring. It was, as you probably well know, Maria Cuomo Cole married to Kenneth Cole, and her mom and her dad's legacy, and particularly her mom Matilda's, of mentoring and working with youth in foster care. I got connected to that from early on in my career. And then when I had this adoption experience and search experience, I was like, well, wait, like these things can combine, and I can create this program where adopted adults mentor to youth in foster care. And it was as simple and as complicated as that. I had no clue what I was doing. But that's when I decided that part of what I needed to do in my life, and not necessarily my work, because I never ever thought my work would be this. I thought it would always be in corporate America. That's when it kind of clicked. And then there was no turning back from that point.
Right. Now, how does being adopted and all that you've experienced and continue to experience play into your role as the chief executive at Donaldson Adoption Institute? And how does it play into, obviously, your role as an advocate?
So, gosh, it's been such an awakening. I never intended to be a professional in this space. I was conditioned to, as many of us were, you go to college, you get a job, you're in corporate America, you're going to, hopefully kick butt and do well and maybe mentor and do these things that, just were kind of ingrained. But I never in a million years thought I would leave corporate and have this as my work. Mm-hmm. I thought I would always do it as a second job, if you will. And as I started many years ago doing this work in foster care, and I started right in Harlem, which is where I live today, at Harlem Dowling, which was an agency dedicated specifically to children of color and families of color. And that's where I first started the mentoring program. And once I walked into that agency so many years ago, very naively saying, I want to help the kids that need the most help, but that's therapeutic foster care. And once you are exposed to therapeutic foster care, once I was exposed to that as an adult, even though I had come through a system very similar, I was just blown away. I thought, well, wait, I had so many questions, and I thought, why is this happening? And where is the advocacy for these young people? And, it became, and foster care was my entry point as an adult in working with young people there, that got me plugged into this idea of creating bigger change. And again, selfishly, I was putting so much emotional energy into the one-on-one relationships and building this program that at some point I reached, and I'll never forget, I was walking down 7th Avenue at Adam Clayton Powell in Harlem, and I was emotionally exhausted, and I thought, I can't keep doing this work one-on-one without thinking that greater change can occur. Mm-hmm. And that's when I joined the board of the Institute, because I thought, there's got to be a better way, policy, practice, impact, research. There's just got to be a bigger movement attached to this, and that's when I joined the board. Never in a million years thinking I would run it ever.
Wow,
it wasn't even a thought.
But it just so aligns with who you are and what you're passionate about. I'm curious, when you walked in. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Nope.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm curious when you walked into the agency where you talked about you learned so much that you didn't realize about foster care. What were some of the things that were revealed to you that really made you even more passionate about helping these children?
Oh, gosh. Well, walking through that door, right, was like kind of walking back into, part of my life. I remember, when I look back at the paperwork that came with me, and I look at it very as often as I am emotionally able, because it's a really important thing to remind me of how far we have come, but how far we need to go. My paperwork very explicitly says, this child may be of mixed race. There's a birthmark that indicates it. And I was like, I was brown then, I'm brown now. Mm-hmm. This was just all about this embedded sort of constitutional racism and, very hard race, class, and culture things that were happening at the time. And when I walked through that door, and even an agency focused on Black and brown kids and families, I was like, wait a second, like there is so much going on here. And so I just knew then that not only was it important from an adoption standpoint, but then you get into differences of race, class, and culture, and then you get into all these adjacent sort of elements of class, right? Mm-hmm. That's one. But then women's reproductive health and health, family dynamics, poverty, class, like this was so much deeper than I ever could imagine. And I just, the work like almost like laid itself out.
Right.
In front of me that couldn't be denied or ignored.
And now what kind of work does the Donaldson Adoption Institute do for the community?
So the main pillars are research, education, and advocacy. And basically what that looks like is really finding and being evidence-based, right, and research-based in the ability to affect policy, to educate, and to create tools for a community and a wider world that quite frankly, I think is sort of the next evolution of some of the work that we do, is broadening outside of adoption into this idea of the modern family and how far families have come in terms of the change in how we're behaving as families and individuals. That's sort of the future. But for now, we look at everything from, we just did a report on first birth parent experiences, an area that has very little research attached to it. Like, there's this like, all this stigma, shame, and just quite frankly, lack of education that comes with, who are these people that make adoption plans or give birth and decide that they don't want to, don't have the resources to parent, and who are these people who have their children removed from their care. We don't hear enough about those experiences. We don't understand them enough, and we don't try to preserve families enough. So that's an example of research. We hope that informs policy changes and practice changes. Education is everything from doing screenings of movies to having talkbacks after is a very, very simple dimension, and then doing online curriculum for parents and professionals about more openness and extended family relationships and adoption, to the advocacy work that we do where we want to make sure that every state allows adopted people access to their original birth certificate, which right now only a handful of states allow that. So in essence, we can't have access to what is undeniably a human right, your own record of your birth.
And is that to keep secret? No, I was just going to say, is that to keep secret the birth parents, or what would be the reason not to allow someone access to their own birth certificate?
So because of the historical legacy of secrecy and shame and quite frankly, the societal sort of forces that are still at play today, but in different ways, back in the time of really the closed adoption system, which I was a part of, a birth mom came into contact with the adoption world and was told, you're going to have this baby. we're gonna make a plan. The baby's gonna be fine. You're gonna go back to your life. Everything's gonna be fine. There weren't enough resources, services. There wasn't enough research that was like, well, what happens after someone relinquishes their child, and what are the emotional layers that come with that? We know now much more about that today. And then the baby, right, was supposed to be just, so one of my dear friends in this work, Leslie Pate McKinnon, says you can't amputate a child from one family system and graft them onto another. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
So then a child was supposed to just be grateful, happy, fine that they had a family. And so I think, and there was such stigma around unwed motherhood, unplanned pregnancy, and on the reverse, like the pressure and the reality of couples in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even today, that can't naturally, biologically have children. There's stigma and shame attached to that. So there would be, this, like, even as lengths as putting pillows underneath, women's bellies to let it appear that they were pregnant. And when the baby showed up, I mean, people went to great lengths to keep this. And I think ill-informed, but, very, very much in line with the times and how, and sort of some religious forces at play too, which aren't completely gone today, but we've got better, we've gotten better with this, but it really was about, I think, like a lack of education, understanding, and research and resources around like what these experiences would do to individuals. And then just the societal forces around, it's fine. Like, don't worry, everybody goes back to normal and you'll be fine. And don't think about it, young women being sent away to these homes. And so we've unraveled quite a bit of that, but there's still an inordinate amount of work to do. So even though birth parents weren't given and promised or legally promised and couldn't legally promise anonymity, the practice of this work was really such that a lot of women and men were told that they would have anonymity and believed that. So I think sometimes the pushback comes from, not a legal reason, but really a societal, ill-informed reason that says we have to keep these things secret.
Wow, thank you for explaining that. I've never thought about before just this idea that so much judgment and shame is projected onto people that go through the process, whether you're the child being adopted or the family who's adopting, or as you said, the parents or the mother who is releasing the child. It's just from everyone else that's not involved, there's judgment and shame for, even if people don't realize it consciously, that may be placed on these families, and then you all are left to deal with it and have to navigate it.
Yeah, with very, very little resources and lack of understanding. Even so, adopted people are overrepresented in several different areas. One is seeking out clinical resources, mental health resources, mental health resources, education deficiencies like ADHD and dyslexia and such. But the professional community also hasn't caught up with our overrepresentation in some of these spaces. So oftentimes clinical folks don't have the resources to receive us, right, as their patients. And I know from personal experience that it takes a long while to find the right resources. And the resources I have actually tapped into and found haven't necessarily been clinical. They've been about building community and having people around me who understand my experience. So that's where the sort of the real impetus is now. I mean, we now have a huge body of research, not just from the Institute, but from other entities, that now what we need to do is really move to this space of using that research to inform education and inform tools that people in support of individuals and families have to put into work, because we know what to do. Like, there's no question anymore about what's right based on research. It's now a matter of actually doing it and putting it into play.
And I would think to inform policy as well, right?
No question. There is such an opportunity in, educating our policymakers. And I'm always blown away. I have such respect for, as hard as it is sometimes to see the work that our policymakers and our lawmakers are doing. I do have such respect for a lot of the people that are doing that work, because certainly, not everybody's willing to do it and able to do it. And as much as we see gridlock and deadlock and a lot of back and forth and some really unproductive behaviors, there are some really committed folks. But, it's about raising awareness and educating and giving them some really solid evidence-based information that can help them be better at making these policy decisions. And, a lot of times people think that adoption is this sliver of the population, and it is in number, right? It's less than 4% of the population are impacted by adoption, but over 60% of the population actually has an indirect connection to adoption through friends or family. So, when you exponentially think about birth parents, adoptive parents, adopted people, their extended families, we exist in greater numbers in terms of these connections. And I think we are uniquely designed as a community to help really get at some of what plagues family in general, not, what's challenging for adoptive families, but what we think about in terms of what's healthy in adoptive families: openness, healthy identity development, information and access to information. Those things are actually good for all families.
All families, right. Absolutely. Now, your work has also included workshops and education. I don't know if this is within or outside of, or probably both, the Institute, but your work has included providing information for adoptive parents and professionals involved in transracial adoptions, which I think is I would imagine, a very specific experience. As a transracially adopted person, what are some of the things you really want people to understand?
So this has definitely changed over time. I 18 years ago, 17 years ago, when I started doing these workshops, independent of any organization or affiliation, this was just April showing up and wanting to help and, again, channel my own energy around this personal experience. There was a workshop that I started called What My White Parents Didn't Know and Why It Turned Out Okay Anyway. And it was really like this personal narrative of, really my parents being set up to just say, what, don't worry, she might be brown, but it's fine. Like, they were given from the professionals were really like, even in the official paperwork, were like, she might be brown. We don't know, but don't worry. So it's kind of like, okay, like, we don't have to worry. We love all people. So we'll love April and she'll be great and it's fine. But the truth is that the world is much bigger than what was happening on Woody Hill Road in Westerly, Rhode Island. It was a world that didn't see me as cute and cuddly and all the things that my parents thought I was and amazing. They were like, yeah, she's different and we're about to tell her so. So the workshop that I did then is actually slightly or maybe even very different than it is now, because quite frankly, then it was actually, in my opinion, it felt a little bit safer to be a person of color in a white family, oddly enough. And I actually think it was easier at that point, in some ways, for my family to sort of manage through this, even though they weren't equipped with a lot of tools. I think you fast forward to today, my workshop has taken on a particular sense of urgency to create emotional and physical safety for children of color in white families. And it's not about, what my white parents didn't know how it turned out okay anyway, like, oh, haha, like that's, there's a lot of deep stuff in that, but it was really an entry point to bring people in and have them listen. But now I'm like, it's much more urgent and direct, and I talk about starting a conversation about race and inviting adoptive parents who have adopted transracially into a room to say, if you haven't and you're not talking about race, class, and culture and acting on these things, you're not doing your job. Mm-hmm. And you better say the N-word in the mirror to yourself, because your kid's going to come home and say it to you because someone said it to them. And this better not fall on you in a way that's so jarring that you render yourself incapable of working through this pain with your kid. So I say, look in the mirror, say these words. Be very clear that your job now is, as a family of color, because you are in the world now, you have to have these conversations and act on these things every day. It's not transactional. It's not going to the African American Day Parade. It's not going to the hair salon once a month. This is embedded now into your family's culture that you now have to embrace, and you have to prepare your kids to be in the world that sees them and that treats them very differently than they treat you.
Right. And do you think that it's in that way you're sort of telling the parents to there's no way to really protect your child from that as much as what it sounds like you're saying is prepare your child for that.
Oh gosh, and this is the thing, and not being a parent, but what I have channeled through the work that I do with young people and being around so many parents, it's a parent's worst nightmare, right? To not be able to protect their kid.
Right.
But it's in a way every parent's challenge and one that they'll never truly be able to achieve this idea of pure safety. But you add on incredible layers of complexity when you're parenting a kid of a different race. And it's not okay to be transactional about it. It's not okay to say, well, and for professionals either, to say, well, we talked about, what parents are going to do to explore culture. That's cute and nice. I appreciate that, and that's necessary. But you got to talk about the really, really urgent things that are happening in this country and other places around the world and not just to black and brown people, but to people of all races that are different from, some of what people think is the majority,
Or considered different. They're not, but
that's exactly right. So, yep.
So what would be your advice to, I know there's not one answer as a cure-all, but what would be your advice to, say, if there are parents who are listening or on the other side, people who come from a family where they may have been of another race and adopted, and they're still trying to figure out how to navigate some of these conversations, especially in the climate that we have today. What would be your one piece of advice? Would it be start having those conversations?
I mean, the first thing, I think it starts with a reflection, especially for parents, a reflection of their identity, right? Their identity as a parent, their identity as a person in the world, their identity as a white person in the world, a person of privilege in the world. You have to start with that and an acknowledgement of your place in the world. And then you have to have that inner conversation and that really tough one of, where are my personal biases? At what point does my posture change, or does my feeling about something change? And be really brutally honest with that. That's the only way that you can invite in a truly honest and authentic conversation about differences of race, class, and culture within your family. You have to start with yourself. So, and that means it can be a solitary journey at points, like putting yourself in places where you are the minority purposefully. Like, be in that, feel it, see how that feels, and realize that you can remove yourself from that, right? You don't have to be in those places. You choose to be in order to educate yourself, but your kid doesn't have that same privilege.
Right.
And this is true too for, we see so much in mixed race, family building today, that these are things that, families are struggling with and challenged by, and quite frankly, coming up with fascinating, fascinating opportunities come from this when you think about when you are kind of really in it and you take this on in a transformational way. This can be ingredients to how things shift in our world. It's not why we do and act in adoption, I don't think, and it's not what we do and act as we, come into our romantic lives with other people who may be different from us. But I think the reverberation of that, when really experienced authentically, does make a difference and change. I think of my nieces and nephews. They see the world different because I'm in their family and I'm brown. Mm-hmm. They have a different type of ability to connect with me in the world because a space has been created for them to see the world in a different way, just merely because I actually am present in their family. Now, we take it a lot further than that because I get them to see me here and there. We have these conversations and we're plugged into it, but they have a different way of seeing race, class, and culture because I existed in their family.
Wow. Now tell us about your podcast, which I had to listen to. I subscribed. I absolutely love it. I know you have about.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have maybe 10 or so episodes. You just started it this year. And, well, I won't explain what it is. I do love it, though, but I would love for you to explain. And I love just the storytelling, though, and how powerful it is. But tell us about it. Born in June, raised in April, and what it's all about.
Thank you. I'm coming from you, Elayne, who is one of the more masterful sort of narrator storytellers and providers of content. It's a huge compliment. So beyond honored that you would even consider it and speak highly of it. So thank you for that.
Of course.
So my biological mother at birth named me June Elizabeth. And my adoptive parents liked the name April and liked the name Elizabeth and thought of that as my name before they knew that I was already June Elizabeth. And so there's some. And so I fast forward. I found out that my biological mother's middle name was June. My maternal grandmother's name was June. So June had a legacy. So just even knowing that I was named and that there was a meaning to my name had a profound effect on my identity. So that's one piece of this. And then I just found it so fascinating. And there's a lot of ironies in adoption and a lot of like surreal moments where you go, how could this be? So this idea of born in June, raised in April is actually really a metaphor for, you're born into one family system and then you're raised into another, right? You're born in this month, but you're actually raised in this month and your birthday is actually in that month. So what I've been doing is really first looking at my personal journey. But one of the things that has been incredibly enlightening for me is being able to take the calendar and the 12 months of the year and think about milestones that we could all identify with: our birthdays, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Independence Day, Christmas. All the holidays were just coming, that are upon us, or a right to be here, and New Year's. And looking at how those milestones on the calendar affect profoundly and impact people who are in the extended family of adoption. And I'll give you an example. So Thanksgiving, holiday rooted very much in family, right? It's the family holiday. You sit around that holiday table, and by just the very nature of family, what happens in my family and the other families I've been around, inevitably you get these conversations. Oh my gosh, Aunt Dawn does that same thing that Cooper does. And man, Cooper looks just like, Grandpa or like, wow, as Jim gets older, he looks so much like Big Al. Wow. This is an automatic thing that happens when you are not biologically connected to that family. You sort of live on the edges, right? Like I am so much a part of that family. Man, my sister and me, who are not connected by blood, we have our own language. Like there is a closeness that is beyond any of my wildest comprehension, and a love there that is, I don't even know how to have the words for it. But we just look vastly different, right? And so while my family, in having these conversations, and I don't think any family does this on purpose, right? Like this is how the families operate, but you're not part of that. This just falls on adopted people in a different way. Why I'm doing this in such a way is because I think families today who are experiencing adoption, whether transracial or not, underestimate some of the things that happen throughout the year. And you can see behaviors change around back to school, birthdays, when I was pitching a fit when I was 5, and even when I pitch a fit today when I'm 40 something. I know why this is happening. It's because I have to think about my birth mom. Is she thinking about me when she was alive? She's no longer with us on the planet, but did she think of me on that day? What is this really my birthday? Like, was I really born? These things are like seriously embedded and imprinted on adopted people and can be triggered through these holidays, these family moments. And I just want to make sure that through my personal experience with these times along the year in the calendar, I'm hopefully giving people some openings, maybe for conversations, for more learning. And right now I'm doing it through some really personal exploration, but my hope is that I can bring in the new year, the strategies to bring in a much more broad conversation, bring on guests, and make this be about an exploration of identity and family and connectivity beyond adoption.
I love it. And like I said, it's powerful storytelling. And from a podcaster side, it's so well produced. It really feels like almost like the programs on Gimlet. I don't know if you're familiar with Gimlet, but it's really well done. So for anyone who's curious, please listen. Born in June, Raised in April. I've listened to 2 so far. I just found it today, so I can't wait to go through the rest of them. And yes, you mentioning that the one I listened to, you talk about when you finally connected with your birth mother and that story and how she didn't want to connect, which you mentioned earlier in our conversation, and just sort of how you are still working to move past that. And I was curious to ask you, what made you, one of the things you mentioned in the episodes that I heard was this idea of sharing as healing and the importance of sharing your story to heal. What made you decide to use a podcast platform as one way to share your story?
Well, I've always, I think, been, this because communication sort of like my matrix is about communications and different ways to connect with people. So this was a natural outgrowth, really, of what I was doing and some of the writing I was doing on Huffington Post and other places, and really the inspiration came from, ironically and powerfully and beautifully, my biological cousin, who is an amazing woman. Talk about an impact that I've barely known her, 3 years now, and she has been an amazing influence on me. Really talked to me. I'll never forget it. We're down the shore. And one of the more the closer sort of biological connections that I've had up to now. There's been many of them, but this one was very unique. And she basically was like, really, you should really start a podcast. And my biological cousin is the engineer. And he is a young, fabulous, bright, amazing young person who just graduated from college, and he's going to be a star. No, Josh is so that's okay. Devin. Devin's my engineer. Okay. Josh is my producer, and Josh is one of my oldest friends' husbands who believes in me and believes that there is something here, and has been an incredible champion of my work. And he, in his own right, producer, performer, movie producer. I mean, like, he's just amazing. So I just feel completely blessed. So the idea was one that I'd been kicking around, but then between, family members and people being able to help me do this and do it, gratis and pro bono. Man, exactly. Boy, that you said it. And I'm grateful for every bit of energy that Devin and Josh put into this.
Yes, I can't wait to see just how it evolves. I love that this first part of it is so much about your story and your journey. And then as you said, if you consider bringing in other people, we'll have at least that part of it to talk about how you got to this point. So it's really, really powerful. Congratulations. I love it.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you.
Now, what would you say, or why would you say it was important for you, as you shared on the podcast, but why was it important for you to search for your birth family?
It was just essential. It was like, it had to happen. And, I talk a lot about this idea, because a lot of people will say, and still do today, and I find it such an opportunity for an educational moment, which is, gosh, don't you love your adoptive family? Like, right. Why would you do that? Like, that's so mean and terrible. And your family must be so sad that you want to, like, they're not going to say.
And that judgment.
Exactly. The irony is, if my family didn't love me the way they do so fiercely, I wouldn't have had the center to be able to take this journey, and to do so in a way that really I knew I would be okay regardless of the outcome. Because you don't know, right? I went into it thinking, in my little April mind, Harry Belafonte and Elizabeth Montgomery are my family. I'm going to find them and it's going to be amazing. And I'm going to have, I'm going to be in Hollywood and someone's going to want to tell my story and I'm going to be rich and famous. Like, even young adult April was like really thinking of these fantasies. And the reality was grown-up April was met with very little to no reception, love, and goodness and kindness, and based on, I think, my birth mom's own pain. But not only that, it was profound. Some of what she shared with me in terms of my beginnings, and there was no way I would have handled it without the love and support and the knowing that I could go back to that place where my family is and always has been, and the ground didn't swallow them up, that will receive me and take care of me and love me and will not judge me for doing that. It's something that was essential to my identity and still support me today. They are cautious, trust me, and this is exactly the role they need to play too. They are my family and they are fiercely protective of me. So they're still kicking the tires around. They're like, wait a second here. Let's see. But they in no way feel that I am leaving, and that I think they ultimately believe what I do, which is never too many people to love or to love me. And my hope and dream one day is that they all come together in some way, shape, or form so that we can all be, connected.
Now, how would you say you've evolved as a woman throughout your journey, and how has your understanding of your own identity evolved?
This was like two parts of this. One is my identity as a person, as a woman, and then there's my racial identity, which is I separate them because I think they're obviously certainly interconnected, but there's I really feel like in the last 5 years, I would say, I can really probably say that with confidence, that I have truly come into my racial identity. Truly. And it feels amazing, powerful. It's also jarring for some people because I don't talk the way I always have talked in terms of maybe not by my tone or tenor, but what I say and how convicted I am around certain topics, especially today, is different than in my early 20s. And I've only been able to connect with that and because I've gone after it.
And because I made because of how you identify now, or different in what way?
Different in that I have always been a person of color. I've always known that, but I haven't always engaged in conversation around the topic. It was very purposeful that I moved to Harlem 17 years ago. It was very purposeful for me to be here. New York was one thing, but Harlem was something very different. I needed to be around people of color. I wanted to be around people of color. I felt alive and awake and inspired and all those things. And I still do. And I feel just as inspired and awake and alive when I am in Rhode Island, but for very different reasons. And I feel my energy shifts when I drive over, the 3rd Avenue Bridge or the Madison Avenue Bridge, or come through the Bronx into Harlem. My whole energy shifts in ways they're hard to even explain, that makes me feel like that this is home too.
So how would you say then, when you talk about your own identity, you said it's sort of separate from, or you see it as sort of separate from who you are as a woman?
Yeah. So this gets a little bit political, but when we were 8 years ago now, 7 years ago, 9 years ago, as we started to really, see Barack Obama, and the potential of him being our president, I'm still evolving. It's hard for me even to say this, but I was Black before I was a woman. And I know that may fall on people's ears in a way that is uncomfortable to them, and it's slightly uncomfortable for me to say it, actually, which again is part of the evolution. But I really did feel so much more empowered, inspired. Now, it had to do with a man too, the man, Barack Obama. It had to do with his message and what I felt about him. No less inspired, quite frankly, by Hillary Clinton at the time, but just feeling like that was so important and powerful to me. And to be able to act on that in such a powerful way then, it changed my life at that point. It really, truly did. And it shifted something in me that empowered me. And so I think that's how I would kind of say it. And I think that's also been partly why my racial identity has come alive in these last probably, and I guess it's more like 8 years really, because I feel like, watching Michelle Obama, watching, Sasha Malia, seeing, feeling like I was a part of this all felt very, very empowering to me. And it's part of who I am. And my power as a woman also comes into play with that. But they're connected, but they're separate.
Right. And I think to your point, seeing Michelle Obama and the girls in there, and whether you agree with the politics or not, it's just they just represented such a possibility of who you could be, how you could move through the world, how you could stand up to people who said awful, awful things about you in a way, in choosing your own way, whether that was going off on people, which they never did, at least not in public, or going, right. or confronting it with grace and all of those things. So I think for a lot of us, there was just this moment of really being able to, as I said, whatever your politics are, to connect with them in a certain way, especially as women of color.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. And I had the great honor of working with Michelle Obama when I was at JCPenney to do an engagement with young women, high schoolers who were having a parent deployed. And so what we found was the children, the little kids, and then the spouses always got the attention for deployed service members, but the teenagers who were having their first prom or going, track meets or graduations were missing parents, and no one was really working directly with them and showing them support. So Jill Biden and Michelle Obama, with their Joining Forces initiatives, we were able to work with young people, young women, and create these magical moments for prom for them in Florida. And I just was in such awe of Michelle Obama that it, like, just the ability to, stand next to her and do something on behalf of children with the deployed service member parent was like life-changing, quite frankly.
Wow. I can't imagine. That's wonderful. Now, how would you say then that your work has evolved as you continue to do your own personal development work and all the other things that you're doing to evolve as a person? How has your work changed as a result?
Well, gosh, I mean, it's all tied together, right, with professional identity, personal identity. And one of the things I realized and underestimated was, like, in corporate America, I could take a day off from being adopted, but in this work, I'm adopted every day. And I underestimated that sorely. So how that's impacted my work is several layers to it. One, I think it makes me very passionate about what I do, and it gives me insight because I have a personal connection to this work that it makes me uniquely designed to lead an organization like this, both from a personal standpoint and from a professional standpoint with what I've learned over the years. But at the same time, I have to be extremely careful about self-care, extremely careful about things were manifesting in my body, actually, that were signs of having not enough outlets and not enough energy going out. Too much going out, not enough coming in, this kind of this imbalance. And, when your body reacts to things, you stand up a little straighter and you get your acting here and say, okay, wait a second now. So I think my work has changed in that I was ruthless and sort of I guess I still am in a way of doing the work. But I'm much more mindful of taking breaks. I'm much more mindful of, it may not be apparent to people, but I am, a meditation practice that has been like a godsend, and just making sure that realizing I'm only as good in my work as I can in terms of taking care of myself and making sure that I'm okay physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
I love that. I'm glad you're taking care of yourself. It's so important, especially when you're...
Yeah, I try.
Yeah, especially when you're passionate about... It's hard to... I shouldn't say it's hard to do. It's hard to forget when you're so passionate about the work that you do.
Yeah. It's... Your body will remind you, though, right?
Exactly. Your body's like, you will sit down today or I will knock you down.
Yes. Yes, this is true. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, you work hard and yes, definitely.
You are dedicated.
Now, what would you say, are there any resources or anything that you would share with our audience, whether they are children who are adopted or people who are adults who are children who are adopted, or on the other side, parents who are considering adoption? Are there any resources, organizations, or things where people should go to check out that you can recommend off the top of your head?
Sure. Well, there's a few things. One, obviously, the Institute's website, adoptioninstitute.org, which is chock full of. We do a news feed. We pull from all the different news channels and make sure we have a steady drumbeat of news that's connected to adoption, foster care, family. We have got our openness curriculum and different resources for families, parents, practitioners, policymakers, advocates. A couple of my personal favorites. I'm involved with a couple of amazing programs. One is called All Together Now. It is a community-based program where everyone is connected to adoption. So there's a play group for children who are adopted. It is facilitated by adopted people. It is supported by teen mentors who are adopted. There's a tween program, and there's also a parent education program. So everybody is connected and learning and evolving in their personal identity and their family identity. And it has, every time I do a session, and I was running the teen mentoring program for a while, and now I'm on the board of that organization, little April is healed a little bit because it's something I didn't have access to, and my family didn't have access to. So these are my favorite things that I'm doing today. And so, there are lots of resources on the Institute's website that people can visit, and obviously my podcast and, hopefully this idea of sharing personal and the different resources is a way for people to find their entry point for what they want to learn about and know.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's great. I'll make sure I have links to that, but I wanted to hear from you just what some of the things that you recommend are. I will absolutely link to that so everyone can go check it out. Now, if there were one thing that you want people to understand about people who are adopted or in foster care, what would it be?
Gosh, I think it's more about this overall experience, which is we keep saying adoption is not a one-time transaction. It's a lifelong transformation. Mm-hmm. And with that is been this kind of overarching view that, once the adoption is done and you get that final adoption certificate and, the court says this is final, it's all good. There are many things that adoptive families and people who work with adoptive families and the extended community around adoptive families need to know about that. So I just keep saying that, it's not a one-time transaction. It is a transformation, and transformation is a journey. And when you have the resources, the mindset, the ability to love, learn, and be healthy in your identity exploration and formation, then we're getting there. There's a couple of things that today have been very encouraging. One is the program This Is Us, which is on NBC, which is really has done an amazing job with the adoption narrative. There's some things that they need help with, but they've done one of the better resources out there today.
You should be a consultant for them.
I should be. Someone has done an amazing job with that. And then the other one that's out now that people should see, just in terms of understanding the adoption experience, is Lion with Dev Patel, Rudy Mara, and Nicole Kidman.
Okay.
Highly recommended. Beautiful. It's based on a true story. It's one of the best, most honest and authentic experiences for everyone in the extended family of adoption, but especially an adopted person's sort of quest for self and journey to understand and be, settled in their identity. 5 stars, see it. Yeah, it's a must see for, and I think anybody connected to themselves and understanding and ever felt out of place in the world, which I think many of us, if not all, have felt at some point, you'll get something from that film.
Wow, I can't wait to see it. That was on my list.
Can't wait.
And I didn't
Good.
even know what it was about. The commercial just looked so captivating. But yes, This Is Us. It's wonderful. Lion, we'll make sure we put a link to that as well. Now, who is supporting you along the journey, April? What does your support network look like?
Well, first and foremost, my family. They allow me to, just to be. And so that's always going to be a center of gravity for me. They don't always get it, right? Like, which is okay. They don't always get it. So where I augment that is my community of adopted people, my friends that share in the adoption experience, especially those people who are adopted. They're my lifeline. My life was dramatically changed. And again, self-serving back when I thought, let's have adopted people mentor to kids in foster care. What a great idea. Well, certainly it was a great thing and selfishly impacted my life so greatly because these mentors that I engaged so many years ago with barely a plan have become my dearest, best, most treasured friends. Mm-hmm. And the people that I've met in the families, the adoptive parents, the birth parents, the adopted people, the professionals, they're my bedrock, my lifeline, the ability that I have to, in my 911, when I say, oh my gosh, can you believe this happened? And I'm doing that thing again, that adopted thing again, I'm doing it. Can you help me? No question that without that community, I don't know. I just don't know where it would be. They've been hugely impactful.
And that was the organization you created called Adopment, right?
Yes, ma'am. That's the mentoring program where adopted adults mentor to youth in foster care, and it's small, but I'll tell you what, it has. I think it certainly changed my life, and I would say that it has changed many people's lives who are connected to it, both the children, the young people, and the mentors. I don't know how I was so fortunate to even be able to bring it to life, but it's been an honor.
I think you're such an example, too, for people listening to, because we talk to women of, all different industries and experiences, but you're such an example with the things that you've created throughout your life, your professional career, but that are such a reflection of your experiences, your personal experiences, which sometimes we keep the two things so separate, which is okay also. But for those people who are listening who might want to, or who are considering, how can I align my work with my experience, or things that, as you said, there were some things that you thought you were missing when you were younger, so you figured out ways to create them and weren't tied to what exactly they had to look like and that kind of thing. So I acknowledge you and appreciate you for just being an example of that for people, of how to sort of keep going and keep creating those things even as you're working in something else until you find a way that it all sort of aligns. And I'm sure nothing's perfect, but it just sounds like you're sort of on this journey where you're really becoming so much, being an advocate for yourself and other people through your work and your personal life.
Well, gosh, again, having people like you and examples and opportunities and spaces that are created to be able to share in this and to I write back to you in terms of living this and finding that space and being an example to others. I mean, I am humbled by it. I feel like it's how I can be a gift, given what I was given in terms of, and I do think life is a gift. My life's a gift. My adoption was a gift. Even with the challenges, my connections to birth family is a gift. The exploration is a gift. That's what my latest podcast is about. It's about gifts and gosh, be able to give it back is what it's all about from where I sit.
Excellent. Now, in closing, if you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
This is so easy. It would be my adoptive mom, my mom. It's her example of sheer dedication and love and the ability to forgive was because I had to learn how to forgive my birth mom for many things. One being the fact that she wasn't open to meeting me as a grown up. So I have nothing but thanks and gratitude to my adoptive mom for, raising me as she did, being that strong example of a woman, and for being the type of human being that knows how to forgive and knows the power of that and understands the necessity of it. And so I have nothing but gratitude and thanks. And her impact on me is just, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be the person I am without that. I really wouldn't. One gave me life, and she gave me, this foundation that I can't imagine my life without it. So she, no question, my mom, Sandra Dinwoodie, the best. Sandra Elayne Dinwoodie. So.
Elayne! Hi,
yes, ma'am.
Miss Elayne. Yay. That's right. I love it. That's why we have a connection. Now tell us how we can support you. I'll have links to everything, as I said, but tell everyone the websites you want us to visit and any social media.
Sure. Well, the website is Donaldson Adoption Institute. AprilDinwoodie.com is my personal website. The podcast, June and April. Social media is all June and April, which is fun. Mm-hmm. And I would just say, counter to maybe this piece of promotion, which is a great opportunity, but I would just say what people can do for me and for themselves is to, especially now, reflect, explore, do the work to creating a healthier identity for yourself so that you can be in the world at a time where we all need to be extremely clear, present, healthy. That's what people can do, for me and themselves, so that we're all, together and working to make things better in the world, period.
Excellent. I was going to ask you for a parting piece of advice. Would you say that was it?
Yes, ma'am. My job has been, I can't not explore my identity. And I feel like that's actually, in a way, a privilege and an honor, because I have to do it, but it feels like it's the right thing to do. So I think I wish everyone would do the work in exploring who they really are, what they're about, and especially if they have access to information, to go after that, because we're only better when we're healthier in our identity and more grounded. So yeah, I would say that's the work we all, I think, are need to do now more than ever.
Excellent. April, I so appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate you right back, and thank you for Support is Sexy. Thank you for all that you're doing to help our entrepreneurial community of women and everyone who you touch. You're really, really a powerful human being, and I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Hold on one second. All right. Thank you so much for listening to that episode with April. I hope you enjoyed that. Be sure to go to supportissexypodcast.com so you can see all of the resources and get links to follow April, catch up with her, email her, have a conversation with her about adoption, about foster care, about anything. She's a wonderful person. Supportissexypodcast.com. Just search April and you will see her show notes there, all of the information that she mentions in this episode, and again, how to get in touch with her. Also, please be sure that you are subscribed to the Support is Sexy podcast. Go to iTunes or Stitcher. Make sure you subscribe. This not only helps the show, but it also makes sure that you do not miss an episode. It'll automatically be on your phone or wherever you're listening, and it'll be there waiting for you whenever you're ready. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast. I really appreciate it. I love having you here. You know I appreciate you. And now you know what to do. Go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.